Picture yourself on New Year's Eve, 1965. 9:30, and you're standing in your front room watching the coal fire throw dancing shadows up the wallpaper. Your mum's in the scullery wrapping sausage rolls in greaseproof paper, and through the thin walls you can hear the neighbours doing exactly the same thing. The wireless is playing dance band music, and outside the street's already filling with that particular kind of excitement that only comes once a year. This wasn't just another Saturday night. This was the night when the whole of Britain stopped, gathered together, and waited for midnight to arrive without a single text message, social media update, or smartphone in sight. This is the story of how we saw in the new year, when connection meant looking someone in the eye, entertainment came from a 12-inch black and white telly, and the biggest technological marvel of the evening was whether your neighbour had managed to get their television aerial working properly for the Hogmanay broadcast from Scotland. If you lived through the 1960s, you know that New Year's Eve wasn't something you planned weeks in advance with restaurant bookings and party venues. It was something that simply happened the same way every year, in front rooms and church halls and village pubs across the country. Everyone did the same things at the same time, and that's precisely what made it magic. By 8 o'clock, preparations were well underway in households from Land's End to John O'Groats. Your mum had been busy all afternoon. There'd be a trifle in the pantry, made with bird's jelly, tinned fruit cocktail, and proper custard from powder. Sausage rolls from the butcher's, still warm if you were lucky, or homemade with leftover pastry if money was tight that month. A tin of quality street sat on the sideboard, the purple one already missing because your dad couldn't resist the toffee penny. If your family was doing well, there might be a bottle of Advocat for the ladies, that thick yellow stuff that tasted like liquid custard, and a few bottles of brown ale for the men. The posh drinks for the kids came out too, probably a bottle of Tizer or lemonade that you'd been eyeing for days. The front room had been transformed. Your mum had dusted the china dogs on the mantelpiece and given the mirror a proper polish with vinegar and newspaper. The antimacassars on the armchairs were freshly starched. Someone, probably your older sister, had strung up a few paper chains left over from Christmas, and they drooped gently across the ceiling, already starting to sag in the heat from the fire. The fire itself was banked up high because New Year's Eve was one of the few nights you didn't worry about the coal bill. The poker stood ready to give it a good going over at 11:30, making sure it blazed bright for the bells. The telly was the centre of everything, if you had one. Not everyone did in the early 60s, though by 1965 most families had finally scraped together enough for a set. Yours sat in the corner, its wood veneer cabinet polished to a shine, the single BBC channel flickering into life when you'd fiddled with the horizontal hold long enough. No remote control, of course. If you wanted to adjust the volume or change the channel after BBC Two launched in 1964, you got up and did it yourself, and you were grateful for it because your nan still talked about gathering around the wireless to hear Big Ben at midnight, straining to hear it through the static. By 9 o'clock, the house started filling up. This wasn't a formal party with invitations and RSVPs. It was just understood. Your neighbours from number 22 would knock on the door, bearing a plate of mince pies and a bottle of something. Just for the bells, they'd say, though everyone knew they'd be there until 2 in the morning. Your aunt and uncle might arrive with your cousins. The kids immediately dispatched upstairs to play while the adults settled in the front room with cups of tea. Yes, tea at 9 o'clock on New Year's Eve. The real drinking wouldn't start until later. This was still the era when respectability mattered, when you kept up appearances even in your own home. The telly schedule was predictable, and we loved it for that. Light entertainment, variety shows, perhaps a film if you were lucky. Andy Stewart might be on, singing about Donald Where's Your Trousers, getting everyone in the mood for Scotland's celebrations. Morecambe and Wise if it was a particularly good year. The picture quality was terrible by modern standards, all grainy and flickering, and the vertical hold had a habit of rolling just when something funny happened. But nobody minded, because you weren't really watching anyway. You were talking, laughing, passing around the quality street, arguing over whether the green triangle was better than the purple one. Children ran between rooms in their pyjamas and dressing gowns, wild with the knowledge they were being allowed to stay up past midnight. In any other context, being in your nightclothes with guests in the house would be mortifying. But New Year's Eve had different rules. You'd be sent to make more tea around 10:30, the kitchen suddenly feeling arctic after the warmth of the front room. The kettle whistled on the stove and you'd stand there watching the steam rise, hearing the laughter from the other room, feeling impossibly grown up because you were trusted with the tea tray. As 11 o'clock approached, the atmosphere shifted. Glasses started coming out in earnest now. The women poured Advocaat or Baby Cham, that little deer logo on the bottle promising sophistication. The men stuck with their brown ale or perhaps a whiskey if there was any going. Someone always had a bottle of VP sherry that came out once a year and tasted like sweetened medicine. The kids got their lemonade in proper glasses, not plastic beakers, another sign this was a special occasion. The volume on the telly went up. By now, coverage from Scotland was in full swing. White Heather Club or Hogmanay celebrations from Glasgow, kilts and accordions, and that particularly Scottish kind of joy that seemed louder and more exuberant than anything happening down in England. Your dad might make a joke about the Scots knowing how to see in the new year properly, while polishing off his third bottle of ale. Someone would remember the coal and the bread, the old tradition about what your first footer should bring across the threshold after midnight. A lump of coal for warmth, salt for flavour, a coin for wealth, bread so you'd never go hungry. It was daft, really, all these superstitions, but you went along with it anyway because that's what you did. The last quarter hour stretched out forever. By 11:45, everyone was on their feet, glasses charged and ready. Children were pulled into the front room, given their lemonade in the good glasses, told to hush now. Big Ben was coming. The telly showed crowds gathering in Trafalgar Square, thousands of people in overcoats and scarves, breath fogging in the freezing air, all looking up at the clock tower waiting for exactly the same moment you were waiting for. Somewhere in the street outside, you could hear others gathering too, doors opening and closing, voices calling out to each other. The whole neighbourhood coming alive in those final minutes of the year. No mobile phones coordinating where everyone should meet, no group chats sorting out who was bringing what. Just people stepping outside because everyone else was stepping outside, drawn together by nothing more than tradition and the promise of midnight. Then Big Ben began its slow, solemn march toward 12. The preparatory strikes, 5 of them if memory serves, though you were never quite sure if you were counting right. Everyone fell silent. Your mum grabbed your dad's hand. Your aunt dabbed at her eyes, already getting emotional, and the bells hadn't even started yet. The coal fire crackled in the grate, the only sound apart from the television and the collective held breath of everyone in the room. Bong. The first strike of midnight. Bong. Your uncle raised his glass. Bong. Someone started humming Auld Lang Syne. Bong. Through the walls you heard the neighbours starting to sing. Bong. Your mum was crying now, properly crying the way she did every year. Bong. Outside, the street erupted. Then everyone was hugging everyone, kissing cheeks, shaking hands, slapping backs, all singing Auld Lang Syne at the top of their lungs. The words got muddled halfway through because nobody really knew them, except for should old acquaintance be forgot. But it didn't matter, because everyone was belting it out anyway, linked arms swaying back and forth like they were all on the deck of a ship in a storm. The front door flew open, and suddenly you were outside in the freezing January air, still in your dressing gown, lemonade sloshing in your glass. The street was full of people. Every house had emptied out. Your neighbours, their neighbours, people you'd never even spoken to before, all standing in the middle of the road, singing and laughing and wishing each other Happy New Year. No cars to worry about because who'd be driving at midnight on New Year's Eve? The road belonged to the people on this one night of the year. Someone, probably Mr. Henderson from number 18, started doing a conga line down the middle of the street. Within seconds, a dozen people had joined in, hands on the hips of the person in front, kicking their legs out sideways, snaking down the road in a line of pure, ridiculous joy. Children shrieked and ran between people's legs. Dogs barked, caught up in the excitement. Somewhere a trumpet started playing. Badly. Someone's attempt at a New Year fanfare that was more enthusiasm than skill. Your dad disappeared and came back with a lump of coal, making a great show of being the first footer even though technically he'd already been in the house all evening. Tradition was tradition though, and he solemnly presented the coal to your mum at the threshold while everyone cheered. Then he produced a hip flask, and the men passed it around, each taking a swig of whiskey that made them wince and cough and declare it a fine drop. Back inside, the party really got going. The BBC showed footage from around the country, people celebrating in cities and villages, all doing exactly what you were doing. Someone put records on the radiogram, big band music from before the war that your parents loved, Glenn Miller, Vera Lynn, that sort of thing. Your mum and dad actually danced, properly danced, moving around the front room in a way you never saw any other night of the year. Your aunt joined in, dancing with your uncle, both of them surprisingly graceful for people who'd had several sherries. The food came out in waves. More sausage rolls, cold by now, but nobody cared. Pickled onions from a jar, their vinegar smell cutting through the coal smoke and cigarette haze. Yes, cigarette haze. Everyone smoked then, the room gradually filling with a blue-grey fog that made your eyes water, but was just accepted as part of any gathering. Piccadilly, Woodbines, senior service. The brands people were loyal to like they were football teams. Someone might have brought out a cigar, saving it for this special occasion, the room filling with its rich, exotic smell. By 1 a.m, the children were finally flagging, slumped in armchairs or curled up on the sofa, fighting sleep because they didn't want to miss anything. The adults were in full flow now, though, the conversation getting louder and more animated, stories being told that you'd heard 100 times before but were somehow fresh and funny again after midnight. Uncle Albert's war service, Aunt Jean's first job at the factory, your dad's national service stories that your mum always said were exaggerated but laughed at anyway. The kettle went on again and again. More tea, then more whiskey, then more tea. Somehow food kept appearing. Bread and butter. Jam tarts someone had hidden in a tin. A pork pie sliced into tiny pieces so everyone could have a bit. This was hospitality in the 1960s, making sure nobody went without, stretching what you had to make sure everyone felt welcomed and fed. Nobody looked at their watch because nobody wanted the night to end. There was no sense of needing to be somewhere else, no fear of missing out on some better party happening somewhere else. This was it. This was where you were meant to be, in your front room or your neighbour's front room, with people you'd known for years, seeing in the new year the way it had always been done and always would be done. If you were lucky, someone might suggest a walk, not because anyone needed fresh air particularly, but because it was tradition. A small group would bundle up in coats and scarves and step out into the January night, breath fogging, shoes crunching on frost, walking down to the bottom of the road and back just to say you'd done it. The streets were quieter now, though lights still blazed in windows and you could hear music and laughter spilling out from houses. You'd wave at people you glimpsed through gaps in curtains, and they'd wave back, everyone united in this one night of the year when staying up till stupid o'clock was not just acceptable, but mandatory. Please subscribe to the channel to keep these stories alive. The 1960s won't last forever in living memory, and these moments, these tiny perfect details of how we lived and celebrated, they deserve to be remembered. Back home, the party was winding down by 2, though the last guests wouldn't leave until gone 3. There'd be the ritual of finding coats, of promising to pop round for tea next week, of multiple rounds of just one more for the road that turned into 3. Children would be carried home sleeping, dead weight in their father's arms. Your mum would insist on sending people home with leftovers, pressing plates of food into their hands despite their protests. Then finally, blessedly, the house was quiet. The fire had burned down to embers. The telly had gone off the air hours ago, just a white dot in the centre of the screen slowly fading to black. Your mum would look around at the devastation, the glasses everywhere, the overflowing ashtrays, the crumbs ground into the carpet, and she'd sigh and say, "Tomorrow. We'll deal with it tomorrow." But before bed, there was one last ritual. Your dad would bank up the fire one final time, making sure it would still be glowing come morning. Your mum would rinse a few glasses, just the worst of them, leaving the rest to soak. You'd all troop upstairs, feet heavy on the stairs, the house settling around you with its familiar creaks and groans. From somewhere down the street you might hear a final chorus of Auld Lang Syne, someone still going strong, unwilling to let the magic end. In bed you'd lie there hearing the house noises, your parents moving around, water running, floorboards creaking. Through the walls you could hear your neighbours doing the same thing, everyone settling down after the excitement. Your feet were freezing because you'd been standing outside in slippers, But under the heavy blankets, warmth slowly crept back in. The smell of coal smoke was in your hair, in your pajamas, in everything. You'd fall asleep to the distant sound of someone singing, a dog barking, the milk float's electric whir starting its early morning round. New Year's Day would dawn cold and grey, and your mum would make everyone a proper breakfast, despite having had barely 4 hours sleep. Bacon, eggs, fried bread, the full works to soak up whatever the adults had drunk. The wireless would play music, and people would pop round to return plates and dishes, lingering for a cup of tea and a recap of the night before. Do you remember when? Stories would start, rehashing events that had happened just hours earlier, already turning them into legend. What does New Year's Eve look like now? Coordinated through group chats and social media events, fireworks displays organised by councils with designated viewing areas, people filming the countdown on their phones instead of living through it. Venues booked months in advance with tickets costing $50, $100, $200 for the privilege of standing in a crowded room with strangers. Taxi apps to get you home safely. Text messages flying around at midnight. Hundreds of them. Happy New Year sent to people you haven't spoken to all year and won't speak to again until next December. But in the 1960s, your celebration cost whatever your mum had spent on sausage rolls and a bottle of Advocate. Maybe 10 bob all in, 15 if you were really pushing the boat out. There were no designated drivers because most people lived within walking distance of where they were celebrating. No one needed a taxi home because home was just down the road. No photos exist of your celebration except the ones in your memory, and perhaps they're more vivid for that, unfiltered and unedited, just raw and real and yours. The technology we didn't have made it better, not worse. No one spent the evening checking their phone to see what they were missing, because there was nothing to check and nowhere else to be missing. The entertainment came from the people around you, not from a screen. When someone told a joke, you laughed together in real time, not through emoji reactions. When your mum cried at midnight, you saw the tears on her face, not filtered through an Instagram story. The connection was physical, tangible. You held hands during Auld Lang Syne. You actually kissed people at midnight, properly kissed them, not sent them a kiss emoji. You heard your neighbours singing through the walls, voices raised in joy and slightly off-key, and it made you feel part of something bigger than yourself. The whole street was in it together, the whole neighbourhood, the whole country, all watching the same programme on the BBC, all singing the same song, all feeling the same thing at the same moment. It wasn't perfect. The house was freezing except right by the fire. The telly picture was terrible. The food was basic. Your feet hurt from standing around in hard-soled slippers on cold linoleum. You'd wake up on New Year's Day with your head pounding from too much smoke and not enough sleep, and you'd have to help your mum clean up the mess because that's what children did then. But God, it was ours. Our tradition, our celebration, our way of marking the turn of the year. No influencers to tell us how to do it better. No comparison with other people's seemingly perfect parties. Just us, in our front room with our neighbours, doing what we'd always done and what we'd do again next year and the year after that. If you remember New Year's Eve in the 1960s, then you know. You know the weight of those heavy blankets on your bed. You know the taste of Advocate and lemonade and your mum's sausage rolls. You know the sound of the whole street singing at midnight, voices carrying in the frozen air. You know the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself, connected to every other person in Britain doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. Share your story in the comments. Tell us about your New Year's Eve celebrations from the 60s. What did your family do? What did you eat and drink? Who came round? What time did you finally get to bed? These memories matter. They're part of who we were, part of what made us British, part of a world that existed before smartphones and social media and the endless digital noise. New Year's Eve 1960s. Britain wasn't about the technology we had. It was about the life we lived, the people we loved, the traditions we kept. It was about standing in the middle of your street in your dressing gown at midnight, breath fogging in the January air, linked arms with your neighbours singing a song nobody knew all the words to, feeling completely, perfectly, joyfully alive. Were you there? I'd love to hear each and every one of your stories. Until next time, hold those memories close, They're pure gold, every single one of them.